Good morning. There were a couple of little points I wanted to bring up that had arisen in the newspaper recently. And since this morning is rather beautiful, it seemed like it might be a nice opportunity to take to relay what was in it. And yes, it was about Olympia and the strange economics at hand. It was in the Daily Olympian about 4 days ago, and it kind of had, I think it had a picture of like these kind of big overblown houses, the type that when you look at, they almost remind you of Futurama video games. You know, you can see these houses in the future molding in the rain and falling apart, but they're kind of huge in the way of square footage. It's like living in a kind of a box store. Wow, there's the Sandman. Excuse me. Yeah. There's the Sandman, sorry. The one with the little red light. And the story was centering on the fact that these big sort of strange homes are being built, but there's absolutely no market for such homes. That people are basically single in this area. There's very little in the way of anyone having children. And wow, I'm loving the sunrise. There's very little in the way of any kind of real economic structure here. It's said that people either are completely destitute and living you know where, Hamburger Hill, Tent Town, or they're making like all the same amount the other way. And it's these non-profit amounts is what I found from thumbing through the non-profs. So you either have here starving people, or you have the social workers. And it was just black and white and loud and clear. And it was kind of comparing this to other areas where you're going to have, I don't know, businesses where people are maybe making, I don't know, $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year, maybe lower amounts, but more than Tent Town, but less than this kind of, it was weird. It was like the population here is split in half. 55,000 was the median, basically saying that it's 100,000 because you've got half making nothing. So the other half are just pulling it really down. I called I actually called the journalist. I don't do that much, but I just wanted to tell him thank you for the statistics, you know, because we can kind of drive around and, you know, wonder about things, but to see the black and white of it and to know that, yeah, this is a town of social workers making money off of, right? The whole poverty pimp thing. But what was interesting was he didn't want to know about that there was a time. It was shocking. I called and just said, wow, thank you so much. You really put it out there. We can really see what the whole economic structure is, just within your few paragraphs. It was just pure information. And he was like, thank you, I really appreciate it. He's glad someone's, reading it. And he was really nice. And then I said, it's really interesting that you've got this this going on here. There used to be mills here. There used to actually be an economic system. And a very good friend of mine had told me, and I looked it up, it was absolutely true, that they cynically, like in the 80s, made it so that it was considered that the wood was milled, I've mentioned this before, if there was a nick in it. So suddenly you've got people who've got jobs as little millers, like the little medieval village, and they're suddenly gone. Everything's going to these offshore weird, it was getting milled on slave ships in, not even in China, just probably a few miles offshore here. These kind of weird offshore slave ships. So that all came into play, and wiped out the town, including just so many other things that I've gotten into here and there, with businesses even being bullied out, even just that, populations, when the kind of cultural Marxists moved in and really put out really confusing stuff, because suddenly they're all pro, it went from Evergreen being an environmental college, hence the name Evergreen, to being this kind of segue for China, really, and knocking down. It was weird. I'm talking to this reporter, and he's like, "Mills? What mills?" And I said, "Well, one of them was where the park is over on the East Bay Drive," and he's like, "Oh, it's like there's a disconnect, and we have a transient population kind of running the show." I remember we had been trying, Doc and I, years ago, this was something Doc had been working on forever, but I came in and found some really incredible paperwork from down in Washington, D.C., and we called the Department of Natural Resources, or one of these puppies, then they all kind of overlap and splinter off and are redundant and do nothing all at the same time. And so there we are, and it turns out this guy who's going through stuff all over the place is not from this state. He's from some desert place, right? Far away from here. And, he was puncturing aquifers, saltwater ones, freshwater ones, doing all kinds of crazy things with fracking. This was a while back. This was probably the worst place to frack in ever. They had 38 blowouts in one river alone. So it was a nightmare to look at aerially from the sky. And that was really bad. So, it's funny. It's sort of like the old joke was, when they changed the name of the United States Post Office to Postal Service, that was when the service left. And it's interesting that when the Evergreen State College came in, that was really when, the environment sort of went out the window. And all these kind of fakey, weird places came into being. So now we've got this kind of very false kind of economic system that is getting more and more like Venezuela every day. And these people, they don't check themselves. They don't sort of check their gods, as it were. For New Year's, I received a Noam Chomsky TED Talk on my email from one of these folk, and I thought, I wonder if he knows that Noam Chomsky was a big fan of Hugo Chavez. And I'll never forget reading a hilarious interview of Noam Chomsky back in the 90s in Z Magazine in New York. And Z has some interesting things, but they're like ridiculous and progressive. But I'm really glad that I read it, because he was sort of friends with all these dictators, fomenting all these ideas, and yet at the same time, and he said it, not me, and I was so glad I kept that magazine around for a while. He said, well, I would never live the lifestyle of these people that I'm, he's basically the Pied Piper. He's telling everyone, oh, it's all bad, it's all bad. But he said, I drive a fine car. I think it was a Jag. And I belong to the country club, And it was funny that he had to even say that, So he lives a bougie little lifestyle, and his trade, what you get is his little brainwashing that he doesn't take part of at all. It's sort of like, and I don't know if this one's true or not, but people say that Bill Gates doesn't get vaccinated himself, that he kind of pushes everybody else to be the guinea pig, and I don't know if that's true. I have no clue regarding that one. But with Noam Chomsky, he ratted himself out because of ego, right? He had to kind of say, I'm living the rock star lifestyle here, and I'm in the club and you guys ain't. So I was so grateful. I thought, wow, I don't have to wade through more of his books or lectures or anything, because this little interview summed the whole thing up. So I'm very grateful to the universe for that one, Anyway, it's just a beautiful morning here, and I didn't mean to go downtown, but it seemed important to kind of point that out, that we've got, basically, you're making $100,000 a year here, kind of being, well, not kind of, being way overpaid. And there are so many offices I never talk about. I don't want to sound like too complainy, and I wouldn't have even known about them, except I was going to them in a sincere manner. One of them I've touched upon once is the Human Rights Commission is here, and that is such a glorious title. It's federal, it's the Human Rights Commission. I mean, how much more sort of sacrosanct really can you get? And I did have like a really negative experience up the Capitol, and it was for no reason. It was just a bizarre thing. It's funny though, because it was all because they just didn't want to give me information, and I wasn't yelling at them about it or anything. I just handed them a piece of paper requesting it, but when I asked for a date stamp, all hell broke loose. Isn't that interesting? And a friend of mine, I had forgotten about this, had told me he requested something like that, a date stamp or something, for proof of delivery at the Public Disclosure Commission, and got a stapler thrown at him by the commissioner there. So they get touchy about giving out their info. But, and sometimes I forget that. I take it personally. So I was down there in person. I thought, I live by the Capitol. I've told this story a few times. And went and just dropped it off. And it wasn't even a security guard. The lady, Kathy Frey, who ran the information center, the librarian, whatever she was, records, actually called the state patrol, which was so bizarre because I was trying to be like low key about it, and like I didn't want to like loom around in their lobby, and they had said it's going to be a little while, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go down and have a cup of tea in their little bistro downstairs. They've got this whole subterranean area of endless food. That's a whole nother thing. But after that sort of fiasco, I was like, Doc was like, oh my, that you've got to go to the Human Rights Commission because they're trying to withhold information by like, bullying people. Like, I don't want to give you this and do my job, so I'm going to like call the state patrol on you, right? Like, it was like, something out of the movie Blow or something, right? So we're just like, no, this can't be possible. So I'm like nervous. It's like the Human Rights Commission, I'm all serious, and I don't know where I get that split, because as a proofreader all those years, I should just have known better. And not even as a proofreader, as just my own dumb experiences. It's funny how there was like a disconnect. So I'm, sharpening pencils and, just wanting to be clear about what it is that happened. And I go down there to get paperwork in person, and I was like, nervous. You're going into a somber place of the federal government, of the, arm of ethics, and, so it's a big deal. I'd never gone there before, and it's, up high in one of the few sort of, kind of lowly skyscrapers or whatever here in Olympia. And we've had flooding here at this river. It's kind of running high. And, over here is a really kind of incredible it's like you're trying to like dress decently, look sane, go in, Human Rights Commission. And it was just like, first of all, it was basically a party going on inside, really loud radio, gum chewing, I don't mean to be stereotypical, but it was just, they were shocked that someone was there. It was funny, I think, and it looked like people had just been placed there just, oh my, daughter-in-law needs a job kind of thing. It really had that feeling. No one there knew. They were shocked a person was even there. So it was, it was weird to sort of, when you experience that feeling of, oh my God, it's a dummy agency, right? Like, oh my God, it's not what I thought it was, moment. People do have those. There's weird experiences out there, and that was one of them. It was kind of so weird and surreal. It was sort of beyond complaint. It was just, wow, why is this place even here? And they just had these sort of short little nubby pencils on some kind of desk that had never been used in a million years, and just this loud radio. I even remember the song, just really bad pop song, and everybody was just kind of sitting there eating like at the tables. It was basically, this is our club space, and these desks are now, you know, the buffet. And it was a real eye-opener, you know. It was a real eye-opener in realizing, once again, here's another little portal of gouge. And, you know, how much gouge is in there. For everyone, we just see it. It's a title, Human Rights Commission. You see it, you gloss over, you get hypnotized. But to go in and see the full out reality of it, shameless and bare, you know, gluttonous and hedonistic. There's the airfield.